This is Chris Collinsworth. Be sure to check out the PFF College podcast as our experts provide insight on all the league's top stories. Every game, every player, every play. Download and subscribe on iTunes or your favorite provider.
Hello and welcome to the Pro Football Focus Preview Podcast. Week 15 already. It is mid-December. And this is where the boys separate themselves from the men. I think it goes the other way around, but you know what I mean. I'm David Tuckman, Sam Monson, Mike Renner alongside me. How are you, boys?
Good, sir. How are you?
All is well.
Fantastic.
The Bryce Petty era. You can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him. I will tell you, I was slightly encouraged. 5 minutes into the first quarter, we're down 14-0, and I'm thinking, okay, if anybody tries to play like they haven't given up now, come on. But then they rally, and those pesky Jets win on the road in overtime. You know it's a cruel, cruel world when we get extra time in a San Francisco 49er New York Jet game.
And all it took was the 49ers just stopping doing what was destroying the Jets.
Yeah, you can put rally in quotation marks there because they were given a W, I would say.
Well, in all fairness, it's the 49ers and the Jets. I mean, I think both teams have been giving wins all year. Interesting slate of games. Let's get right into it. One of the most interesting games as far as I'm concerned, the New York Giants hosting the Detroit Lions. Giants coming off a huge win and a huge second half against the Cowboys. And Detroit just continues to roll along. Matt Stafford's finger or not doesn't make a difference, or thumb, whatever it might be. This is an interesting game because the Lions are now the number 2 seed in the NFC, and the New York Giants are intriguingly close to possibly winning the NFC East. But even if they don't win that, they look like they're going to make some noise in the playoffs. Sam?
This is such a weird game because they're both 9-4. But they've done it through completely different ways. If anything, the single most important part of that Detroit team is Matthew Stafford. He's having the best season of his career. He's looking like a legitimate NFL quarterback, having been a guy that basically just throws the ball to Calvin Johnson for the rest of his career. And on the other side, you've got the Giants, who are basically being hamstrung by Eli Manning at this point, having spent years where he bailed them out and got them Super Bowl rings. I was looking through some numbers earlier today for an article on this, and I had this theory that the place where the crutch of Calvin Johnson showed up the most for Matthew Stafford was when he was under pressure, because at that point, there's no thought process involved. It's just, where's Megatron? There he is. Heave the ball. And that was his thought process when he was under pressure. Whereas this year, he doesn't have that option. So he has to actually play quarterback properly and figure out where the ball should go, who's going to be open, do the things that everyone else has to do. And sure enough, when you look at it, his passer rating under pressure this year is above 80, which is 10 points higher than at any other year in his career. He's basically finally had to play quarterback, and it's turned him into a much better player because he doesn't have that safety blanket of Calvin Johnson to go to.
Yes, this game's kind of interesting because I think throughout their careers, a lot of people would have thought of Eli Manning and Matthew Stafford in kind of the same vein or same kind of quarterback tier as far as if you're ranking the NFL quarterbacks. But if you legitimately swapped these two guys this season and put, Eli Manning on the Detroit Lions and Stafford on the Giants would have a chance of being undefeated right now, and the Detroit Lions would probably be about a 2-win, 3-win team at this point, because that's how drastic the quality in play has shifted for each this season. Matt Stafford obviously having a career year, while Eli Manning, he just can't hit open receivers at this point.
The anti-career year, we like to call it here at PFF. Sam, you touched on something, and I wanted to ask you this. From a quarterback basis, there's always been this misnomer, or possibly it's the right thing, that young quarterback needs a go-to receiver, and that's the way that they'll develop. And I wonder if it's actually best to develop a quarterback in his early years without having a quote-unquote go-to receiver, and instead have a bevy of guys you can throw the ball to, and I kind of point to the Chicago Bears right now. I'm not suggesting Matt Barkley is, the next great quarterback, but he's been not awful his first few games. And they haven't really had a go-to guy, and I'm wondering if that's actually that would actually in some weird way help a young quarterback's progression.
Yeah, he's been better than not awful, actually. If you look at the PFF grading for the 3 games that he's started, in that 3-week span, he is the 3rd highest graded quarterback in the entire league. The only 2 guys ahead of him are Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, who are pretty good from what I remember. But I think it's almost a case of whether you're talking in an immediate level or sort of long term, and also on a play-by-play play level or game and season level. I think on an individual play level, obviously having a guy like Megatron or Randy Moss can help you out because you don't need to be as accurate. You can just sling the ball. Those guys will turn a bad pass into a good pass and what should have been an incompletion into a 50-yard touchdown. And obviously that is good for winning that particular game, and it's good statistically and all those kind of things. But in terms of actually developing the guy, it might be a bad thing long term because you can get into the habit of just throwing those bad passes in the direction of that guy. And no matter how good he is, long term, that tends not to be a winning strategy because either you're passing up better things that you can do with that ball, or eventually they just don't win enough of those contested or disadvantageous catch situations, and it ends up becoming a net negative. So I think in terms of developing a guy, you want to have receivers that can win, but not one that's so dominant that you just get into the bad habit of throwing the ball in their direction, regardless of what the coverage says. But the problem is, I think you do need to have a certain level where you can at least rely on the receivers. The problem is if you have a stable of guys and they all suck, there's just nowhere to go with the ball, and there's nothing to read because you're trying to go through your progression and nobody is open. So you don't learn anything.
Yeah, I don't think that's much of a hot take at all. I think
I think it was intended to be, was it?
I mean, I don't think it's much of a. I think it's a pretty widely held belief that if you're a young quarterback, you'd rather have multiple 2 or 3 above average options than one just go-to guy because of basically all the things Sam just mentioned there, and because defense is just defense can scheme to one guy. Defense can't scheme to 3 guys that are going to get open. So I think I think everyone would pretty much agree with that sentiment.
Basically, just diminishing my point. Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate that. That's what we're here for.
Well, I mean, it's a salient point, but it's
it's obvious. Right?
It's a point that
right,
widely held.
Right. It's like when my kid wakes up in the morning and he points at the TV and he just goes, "The TV's on, Dad." Wow, thanks. I appreciate that. I didn't see that.
He's not wrong.
Good point, well made.
Right. Let's turn our attention back to the game, though. So you guys pointed out the disparity between the 2 quarterbacks, Eli Manning and Matt Stafford, in their play this year. Also interesting, of course, is you have strength against weakness on both sides. What's the matchup to watch, Mike, and what will be the determining factor in this game?
I think Odell Beckham, basically how they handle Odell Beckham, that Detroit secondary. The Detroit safeties have been fantastic this season. Obviously, Darius Slay also, been one of the top corners in the NFL for a while now. So, are they gonna have Slay follow? What are they gonna do? What is their game plan gonna be around him? Because as we've seen, their offense kind of comes and goes with Beckham. If he's not putting up 100+ yard game with multiple touchdowns, it doesn't seem like the offense ever gets off the ground.
Sam, anything to add?
Absolutely nothing. I think that is exactly the most interesting part of this, other than the quarterbacks that we've already talked about.
So who wins the game, and what is it, a close game?
I think it could be. I mean, Eli Manning just turns the ball over way too much for them to ever blow anybody out. I think the Giants are the better team, which won't surprise Lions fans. But Eli Manning is easily bad enough this season that he can be the difference in this game, whether he keeps it close because he's turning the ball over, whether he turns it over enough so that they lose the game entirely. But I think top to bottom, they're a better roster and just haven't been as successful.
Yeah, I think the Giants win as well because, as we mentioned, Detroit has all these options. to go to offensively, I think the Giants have just as many options in their secondary to take away all of them, whether it be Janoris Jenkins, whether it be Landon Collins, DRC, Eli Apple, or even Leon Hall. So I think that the Giants do end up winning this one, especially being at home.
Let's move on. I like the Giants as well. Another interesting game of the week. We have Tampa Bay break up the Bucs. They travel to Dallas. I don't know what happened a couple of weeks ago, but the Tampa Bay Bucs looked in the mirror and they said, we can play defense. We can do this. Of course, Dallas Cowboys coming off their second loss of the season, their second loss to those New York Giants. How did the Cowboys rebound, Sam?
Well, they've got to hope that they don't get that kind of bad performance out of Dak Prescott again. We were talking about this earlier in the week in the recap podcast, that this becomes a really interesting situation if you get a second game where Dak Prescott plays badly, because then you start thinking about Tony Romo. You start wondering if the wheels have finally come off this Dak Prescott train, and they need to go to the guy that they know is probably going to be better. But Tampa Bay's defense is nowhere near as good as the Giants, so you have to assume that you're going to get Dak Prescott coming back and being the guy that you've seen for most of this year. And then the question becomes whether the Dallas defense can match up with that Tampa Bay offense.
Yeah, Tampa Bay, really, it's amazing what a pass rush can do to a defense. And I think we've seen that with Tampa Bay, getting Robert Ayers back, having Noah Spence sort of come into his own over the past handful of weeks. Just getting that pass rush is kind of fill some holes in that secondary, especially with the team that plays zone as much as Tampa Bay. If you're playing a soft zone and the guy has 3.5, 4 seconds to pass, there's going to be a hole open. If a guy only has 2.5 seconds to pass, there might not be that hole open. So that's why I think Tampa Bay's defense really came into its own recent weeks. Is that enough still to beat the Cowboys? I'm not sure. The Cowboys offense has been basically lights out when Dak is playing efficiently. Obviously, we saw what happened last week, but I'm not sure Tampa Bay has enough in their secondary to make, to force Dak into the type of game that he has against the Giants.
On the other side of the ball, the Tampa Bay Bucs offense, Jameis Winston, Mike Evans, Doug Martin, and company going up against the Dallas Cowboys defense, which I think by most accounts have exceeded their expectations for the season. How does that matchup play out, Sam?
Sorry, which matchup?
We got Tampa Bay offense versus the Cowboys defense.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I think that becomes the interesting side of the ball, because you've got Mike Evans, who's been extremely difficult to shut down, going up against a secondary that is missing an important player in Morris Claiborne. Without him, he took this big step forward this year. Without him, you're relying on Brandon Carr, and the guys that have come in haven't been as good. And you know that this Tampa Bay team is going to relentlessly target Mike Evans because they just go to him ridiculously. He's just all they have. You're getting some bits and pieces from Cameron Brate, the tight end, but after that, it's just the Mike Evans show, and they're just going to fire the ball in his direction, and he's been able to do huge things. So it's really going to come down to how this Dallas team tries to cover Mike Evans, and if, someone like Brandon Carr, if it's going to be him, can just match up with him and shut him down, which seems unlikely.
Speaking, of course, of a team, speaking of a team, of course, that has a young developing quarterback with one standout receiver. There you have it in Tampa Bay. Mike, you were about to add something?
I was going to add, I think it'd be interesting to see if Tampa Bay is able to run the ball because the Cowboys defensive line, not great against the run, but their linebackers have been fantastic this year against the run. Sean Lee is playing ridiculously high level. If Doug Martin's able to, a lot of times they rely on those linebackers to make plays for them in run defense. Doug Martin's able to shake a few, make a few big plays in the run game. That'll help them out. But the run game's been somewhat, not too great over the past few weeks. So if they're able to get something on the ground, I can see them hanging in this one. But I just don't think they'll be able to. And that's why I think the Cowboys end up taking this one.
Hey, how good is Sean Lee, by the way? This is a guy off injured. He can't stay on the field. It seems like whenever he is on the field and healthy, the Cowboys defense is at least average.
He's Luke Kuechly light to me. He's, that good in terms of being able to read plays. I just don't think he can take on blocks quite as well as Kuechly can, but in terms of reading plays, in terms of what he can do in coverage, he's got those kind of skills. He's a freak, and when he's on the field, it's a completely different defense, much like Kuechly for the Panthers.
Yeah, I think at his best, he is that Kuechly kind of level player. He's ridiculously good, and this last week he was insane. Racked up a ludicrous amount of tackles, though not anywhere near as many as the Cowboys and the NFL credit him with. If you actually go through and look at it play by play, I think we had him at like 14 solo, another 4 assists, something like that. I think the NFL had him with over 20. Like, I mean, there's some serious generous home team doling out of tackles going on there. But I don't think we've seen that player all season. Last year or before, when we've seen Lee actually on the field, he's been amazing. This year, it's not quite been that guy the whole time.
I take it, Sam, I think through all the tea leaves, I figured that you actually are going Cowboys as well here?
Yeah.
Okay. We all like the Cowboys, although Tampa Bay's defense has certainly been a lot better as of late. We'll see if they can get to Dak, and Dak has another bad game in a row. Another interesting game this week, we have the New England Patriots, fresh off that win against Baltimore, traveling to Denver. Are the wheels off the track in Denver, Mike?
I don't think they're off the track. I just think this is kind of the team they've been all season. I don't think they were kind of getting by with some smoke and mirrors offensively. Trevor Siemian is just not a good quarterback. And so when you don't have a good quarterback behind an offensive line that's not very good, it's kind of a recipe for a bad offense. And I think that's basically what we've seen over the past, handful of weeks. And then the defense just doesn't have the teeth that the defense had a season ago. They can't line up and stop the run with just that front seven. They can't, they can't put their linebackers on tight ends like they could a season ago. There's just more holes, and it's not elite level defense. And that's just why they're not, favored for the Super Bowl like they were a season ago.
Is their offense worse this year than it was last year? I mean, I know they had Peyton Manning under center last year, and, if you didn't watch the games last year, you're thinking, oh, wow, okay, Peyton Manning. But we all obviously know how bad Peyton was last year. Is Trevor Siemian worse than Peyton Manning of last year?
No, I don't think he is. But at the same point, that was a very bad offense a season ago as well. And they won the Super Bowl. It's like they were the only team since, the 2000 Ravens to actually have their defense completely carry a terrible offense. And you just have to have a unbelievable high level of defensive play to carry an offense like that. And like I said, they just don't have it this season.
The other issue they have is, so everyone knows that their right tackle is a disaster, whether it's Donald Stevenson or whether it's Tyson Braylow. Russell Okung on the other side isn't much better. He seems to be getting a pass, I think, because the right side is so obviously horrendous. But against Tennessee, Russell Okung gave up 8 total pressures. He's been bad in pass protection consistently throughout the season. He's only actually allowed 4 sacks, but pressure in every single game, like multiple pressures. So they've got 2 tackles that are hemorrhaging pressure. The interior is good at center. I don't think the guards are great, but that's, so suddenly you get this running game that's a problem. You've got tackles leaking pressure, so the quarterback is under duress consistently. Yeah, the offense is a real problem there. I don't think Trevor Siemian is actually that bad. I think he's okay, and he's at the kind of level that could win them games if all you needed was for him to be this game managing quarterback. But like Mike said, if you're going to win that way, the defense needs to be amazing. And the defense is good this year, but it's not amazing.
And by the way, give the Denver Broncos credit. How many teams in the NFL, how many general managers in the NFL find even a quarterback capable of playing backup in the NFL in the 7th round? And that's.
I think it has something to do with Gary Kubiak not more than John Elway, but I think Gary Kubiak gets kind of underrated in terms of what he can do for a quarterback. He had Matt Schaub playing at a ridiculously high level for a period of time in Houston, and I think we all know what quality of quarterback Matt Schaub is at this point. And he had Brock Osweiler looking like a guy who was worthy of a $72 million deal for, a 4-game stretch there last season. So I think he does well to protect his quarterbacks in terms of, not giving them situations where they're going to turn the ball over, where they have to, make big plays down the field. He does well at doing that. And I just think he kind of gets underrated in that respect, whereas a lot of he's just not thought of as one of those top offensive minds, even though, he's done fairly well with not much a quarterback.
Could Kubiak actually make Fitzpatrick look good?
No,
not
sorry.
Sorry, Sam,
the other
go
thing
ahead.
though, the other thing though is that they were forced into that essentially by luck. You know what I mean? Their alternatives were a first-round rookie that clearly isn't ready from having seen him on the field a couple of times, and Mark Sanchez. So when that's your choice, it's not that difficult to be the guy that comes out of that pile as your starter.
Mark Sanchez, once dubbed by, I believe it was the New York Post, as sex on a stick. Never really worked out for him. The Patriots.
When was he on a stick?
I don't know I don't remember the exact analogy. I remember after his first year when, he was like one of the poster boys and he was getting all this advertising. They called him sex on a stick. I don't know.
I'm not sure that's a door.
It seems uncomfortable.
Sorry. I definitely took this podcast in an uncomfortable path. Are we all like the Patriots in this game?
Yep.
I do.
Okay, it is time for our favorite part of the show. It's Mike's Crappy Bets.
Woo! All right. Well, I think I got screwed last week by the snow game, so throw that one out in terms of my overall record this year. So
I don't think that's how it works.
So I think I'm close to 500. I don't know. I don't keep track. I know my bank account's not close to 500. So here we go. I got the Packers minus 5.5 going to Chicago. I don't. The Packers look like a different team legitimately, and with what they have in the secondary back now, I think their defense has somewhat turned a corner from that mid-season stretch they had. I think they win this one going away. 5.5, even on the road, I'll take it.
Well, let me ask before you continue on, since we'll do kind of a mini rapid fire with this game. Why do you like the Packers by that much? I mean, the total is only 39 points, so Vegas thinks it's going to be a low-scoring game. Giving 6 in a low-scoring game seems like a lot of points especially against a Chicago team and a quarterback in Matt Barkley who's played pretty well as of late.
I'm selling Matt Barkley's recent success. I think it's somewhat of an aberration, and I also think that Dom Capers, while he's not, I don't love him as defense coordinator. I like him scheming against young quarterbacks. He seems to do well in that regard. So I'm just selling Matt Barkley. I'll say I don't think he's going to show up against the Green Bay Packers and have a good game this week. I'll just say that.
So you're saying I should start the Packers defense this weekend in my semifinals of my fantasy league?
It's wouldn't be a bad call depending on who else you got. But yeah. All right.
Okay.
Other bets. Pats minus 3, which we just talked about. I think the Patriots, their addition of a power run game this year that's been pretty consistently successful is going to be the difference in this game, is going to be why I think the Patriots have some success going on the road to Denver. I think they'll be able to have a balanced offense. And I think, and also what I said about the Broncos run defense just not being even close to what it was a season ago. So 3 points, I'll take that in a heartbeat. Then the Falcons.
Hold on a second. Do you like them? Because I'm looking online as well. Do you like the Patriots if they're giving 3.5?
Yeah, I'll take 3.5 as well. I'd take it all the way up to like 5.5.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. That's an interesting take. And you don't think Denver's secondary will be able to shut down Tom Brady and those receivers, do you?
I mean, I don't think he'll have as much success as he did, last week against Baltimore. I think he could put up, I don't know if he'll even go for 300 yards, but I think he could have put up in somewhere in the range of 200 or 240 to 260 and a couple of touchdowns, because I just think. I think targeting their linebackers inside where they're weakest, I think they'll be able to have some success there.
And your third pick of the week?
Third pick of the week is the Falcons at home against San Francisco. They're giving 14 points, I understand, but it's San Francisco. They don't want to win at this point. And so going up against that Falcons offense, they can beat you in so many ways, and the 49ers cannot stop you in any way. So that's just that's a slam dunk. Right.
If the Falcons can't stop Bryce Petty, they are unlikely to be able to stop Matt Ryan and that vaunted Atlanta offense. Not sure, by the way, Julio Jones still coming on the fence. My gut instinct about Julio Jones, by the way, is the fact that Atlanta thinks they can win this game without him. They give him one more week of rest, and they get him for week 16, 17, and the playoffs. So, but we'll see how that plays out. By the way, one thing that I find interesting, I don't even know what side I like. Seattle playing the Rams, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
This game has notoriously been close game after game, year after year. I know Jeff Fisher is gone, but the team is still there. This is a divisional game that I don't know. The spread is 16. Seattle is minus 16. I don't know if their last 6 games have been decided by 16 points total.
No, my brother actually just texted me this morning. He said, I just took the Seahawks minus 16 tonight. And I said, how was, he said, how are the Rams going to score? And I said, well, how are the Seahawks going to score? The way their offenses looked, even though I think the Jeff Fisher factor does have some credence to it. I think with him gone, it is just a little different. And I don't hate the bet, but I'm not going to go bet it myself.
There's no way I'm giving 16 points. I mean, if I was going to be forced to bet it, if I was in some sort of a weekly pool where I had to take a side, I'm taking the 16 points because I don't know if Seattle's
Jared Goff's been bad, though.
I mean,
like Jared, he could give them 16 points himself. So
he could. I can't even dispute that. Anyway, let's get back to the action. Sam, are you intrigued by any of this?
The 16 points thing for that game it's like, I'm kind of with you. It's crazy, and yet I can kind of see it happening. Like, the Jeff Fisher thing is really huge. He just has some freakish voodoo, which is the only reason he had a job for as long as he did within the division. But like, if they weren't in the division, you would say it's perfectly plausible that any reasonable half decent team could stick a 16-point kicking on the Rams. But because it's the division, you suddenly think, well, I'm definitely intrigued by that game and that line.
I mean, you realize every NFL coach is really disappointed when Jeff Fisher got fired, because during negotiations and when they were getting extensions and the owner was like, well, what have you done? They point to Jeff Fisher and they go, what's he done? He's still around. And now they can't point to that.
I'm just disappointed that, one, he doesn't get to claim the record, the all-time loss record, by himself. He's stuck sharing it. And two, that we didn't get to see how Jeff Fisher was going to pull off the miracle of beating the Seahawks this week.
Can we talk about how crazy it is that NFL coaches get these kind of rolling extensions to where they're never a lame duck, to where their contract never expires? They have to be fired. I can understand why that's the case in college for recruiting purposes. You have to have some semblance of stability to bring in recruits. But in the NFL, why not just let a guy's contract expire? Why do you have to extend them for a year beyond the year you're actually in? Does anyone actually care? Are the players on the team actually thinking about that? Like, is that... Because I don't think it's just like a waste of money to me.
Oh, it's definitely a waste of money. But I don't think they want to be left in the freakish situation where, let's say,
a guy just
somehow
walks.
No, yeah, well, let's say somehow, some way, Jeff Fisher suddenly struck gold this season, brought them on a 13-3 record. Jared Goff looks like the next Peyton Manning, and suddenly your head coach that's just orchestrated all that is about to walk out the door because, unless you sign him to like a gazillion dollars. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
I feel like they like extensions only happen when things get good, though. They only happen when the guy does have the coach has some sort of leverage, and that he just had a good season. Oh, let's extend him then. So it's not. I can't see a case where a head coach would be so in demand. That just seems so rare to me. The head coach would be so in demand that he'd be like, "Oh, on the free market, I could get X, X, and X. I should, let my contract expire and walk."
I just think they don't want to play. They don't want to play with a guy, or they don't want to have a guy there that's not tied to them beyond one year, beyond the year that they're playing in. For whatever reason, it does seem ridiculous and just a complete and total waste of money.
Mike, it's the same reason why Pro Football Focus has actually tied me up for this podcast for the next 3 seasons. I just got an extension in the mail. I'm about to sign it at a 100% raise from what I was getting previously.
Did they give you fantasy gold this year? Is that what it is?
Fantasy gold, exactly. It's just in the ooh. Let's do some rapid fire here. We kind of touched on the Los Angeles-Seattle game, even though we don't normally do a Thursday night game. Hey, first off, it's kind of funny. Did you guys hear Richard Sherman just ripping the league again about Thursday night games?
I really liked his idea. He was talking about putting Roger Goodell in pads, sending him out there for a full game's worth of ass kicking, and then seeing how long it takes him to get in the office on Monday morning. Frankly, Roger Goodell gets paid like $45 million a year. I say we do it. That's absolutely fair compensation for one game like that.
Hey,
Let's send him out.
I'm not a Roger Goodell fan, but at the same time, you realize he's only doing what the owners want. I mean, if the owners came out and said, "Oh, we'd rather have a really, really great product. We don't care about the money," then there would be no Thursday night games. The fact of the matter is, the money they make on these Thursday night games goes to the owners and it goes to the players.
All I'm saying is, you give me $45 million, I'll go out there and do that.
Fair enough.
$45 million to drop in the bucket for Goodell, though, with how much he gets paid.
Well, it's only because he's been paid $45 million every year for the past however long.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't like Thursday night football, how about Saturday night football? Now, but this is a doozy. We've got Matt Moore traveling to MetLife Stadium to play Bryce Petty.
Couldn't be more upset that this is a game happening this week because I have to grade it on
Not
Saturday
only
night.
is it a game, by the way, not only is it a game, but it's a game that has playoff implications. I mean, this is a trappy game for the Dolphins that they need to win.
It is. It's kind of amazing that the Dolphins are 8-5 to me. I did not expect it. I actually expected them. I guess I was a believer last offseason in the Dolphins. I thought they had enough, and they really didn't lose a ton over the offseason. Those additions from Philadelphia paid off huge dividends for them. I still don't think without Ryan Tannehill that they're going to make the playoffs. I think they could easily. Win this game. It's the Jets, but the Matt Moore thing's intriguing because he's been one of those guys like Sean Hill. He's been one of those guys who had a few good games at one point in his career, but then he sat on the bench for 5 years now without taking any sort of meaningful snaps. So he could be absolutely atrocious, and no one would know. And
exactly.
I guess we'll find out Saturday.
That's what's really fascinating. We finally get to see if Matt Moore is still this great backup option, because Matt Moore has this reputation as being the best backup quarterback in the league based off the time he was almost starting and then wasn't anymore. But that lasts. That would be his default description until he proves otherwise. So now he gets a chance to either justify it, and yes, I am still the best backup quarterback in the league. In fact, I'm capable of leading this team to wins and looking like a starting quarterback without much of a drop-off. Or actually, in the last several years that I've been sitting around doing nothing, I have become a terrible, terrible quarterback, and I've been stealing money for the past couple of years.
Yeah, I feel bad for Matt Moore. I mean, this is a guy who also, speaking of extensions, just gets extension after extension based on what his reputation was and didn't have to prove himself. Now he's got to prove himself over again. But if he does have one or two good games here, you're talking about a guy who's going to get another really good...
set himself up for
Wait, you feel bad for Matt Moore?
Well, I just feel like
he's made $15 million over the last 5 years without taking a snap.
His con is about to run out. He's going to have to actually show something rather than just cash checks.
Hey, so who wins?
He's only 32 though. Like, it's crazy to me that at 7 or 28, he just decided I'm happy being a career backup. I will be Ryan Tannehill's backup for the foreseeable future, and that is my that is my end game.
Yeah. Talk about Bryce Petty really quick, just because I like to hear. Has he shown anything?
Well, yeah, he's shown that he came from a Baylor offense, because every time he goes out there and drops back, he wants to throw a 9 route deep down the field. Like, it's just, his targets to Robbie, every pass is a deep ball to Robbie Anderson.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, I'll throw this at you then. If I had the Miami Dolphins defense and I had the Green Bay Packers defense, who would you start in fantasy?
Miami Dolphins defense, the Green Bay Packers, probably the Miami Dolphins, just because they'll probably get more sacks than the Packers, just because Jets' offensive line's not great, while the Dolphins' defensive line's pretty darn good. And then Petty, the even more inexperienced quarterback factor there, and then the more inexperienced quarterback factor probably going to throw some picks.
Let's move on here. We already talked about Green Bay, Chicago. We've got Jacksonville at Houston. Somehow, Houston just continues to win. I think if Houston wins that division, Bill O'Brien should win Coach of the Year. It's just ridiculous what he is doing without J.J. Watt and with Brock Osweiler.
Yeah, but like that division, I mean, the Jets would be in contention in that division. Like, it's terrible. Winning that division is basically just a case of being, vaguely less useless than everybody else in it. It's a pretty low bar for Coach of the Year.
I don't disagree. They really aren't. They really should not be 7-6 at this point with just how bad Brock Osweiler is. For a quarterback to be, I believe he's at the absolute bottom of our quarterback rating right now. I don't think we've seen a quarterback, the worst graded quarterback in the league ever make the playoffs in our system. Maybe back the Jets with Mark Sanchez, but it's just they don't have a ton going for them yet. They're above 500 right now. They have the same record as the Green Bay Packers, which, that's pretty crazy.
I mean, Sam, I'll throw this at you, by the way. If I were to tell you before the season that J.J. Watt was going to be injured and that Brock Osweiler would be your lowest graded quarterback, and then I said you've got to play, you've got games versus the Patriots, versus the Chiefs, versus the Vikings, who are going to be pretty good, versus the Broncos, and those are all of your out-of-division games. The Lions, who are going to be good this year. It's not like they had a cakewalk schedule. The Raiders, and they are going to be 7-6 and in contention to win your division. Would you be surprised, impressed? I mean, what would you think Houston's record would be if I told you that?
Well, yeah, but 6 of your in-division games are against the Colts, the Jags, and the Titans. Like, there's no reason you can't win all 6 of those games if you actually want to be a half-decent team. I mean, J.J. Watt is obviously arguably the best player in the NFL, period. So losing him is huge. But they lost him from the area of the team that is their single biggest strength. So going into the season, their defense looked so good because they had J.J. Watt and 2 other complementary decent pass rushers in Jadeveon Clowney and Whitney Merciless. And those 2 guys have both continued being pretty good pass rushers even without J.J. Watt. So obviously you're losing something, but you're still able to bring heat and able to bring heat in more than one place. And the secondary is still pretty good. Again, they've lost guys there, but that was maybe the second biggest strength of the team, is having a ton of corners that can all cover. So the guys that the loss of J.J. Watt impacts 2 areas potentially, both of which were the strongest areas they could possibly take a hit to. So it's a big loss, but it's one that they could deal with. Osweiler playing like crap is a bigger problem, but this was a team that really should be running the ball anyway. And as much as they paid him $72 million, the best they could have hoped for is that he would be a good game managing quarterback and actually be more of a facilitator for everybody else to do things and for him actually do them himself. So yeah, I think they're another team that I don't think is as good as their record indicates. And I think they're slowly kind of coming back down to earth and to more where we think they should be. But it doesn't shock me that they're in and around 500 because I think that's kind of where they could be.
Do they win this week, Sam?
Do they win this week? Yeah, because they're playing Jacksonville. It's one of their 6 division games that easily winnable.
Mike?
Yes. Jacksonville's lost 8 straight now. I'm going
to go with the win as well. Bill O'Brien, I think he's a better coach, and I think his team will be better prepared for the game. Cleveland.
Did you guys see the tweet that shows how many games Bill Belichick would need to lose to have a worse win percentage than Gus Bradley?
It was like 16 straight. Like 11 straight seasons or something like that of 0-16.
Well, he needs to lose over 600 games to have a worse win percentage than Gus Bradley. That's harsh. Poor Gus.
He needs to win games though to beat Ben McAdoo. So
it's true.
McAdoo, Hall of Fame.
Cleveland going up to Buffalo. It looks like your preseason Super Bowl pick, Sam, the Buffalo Bills, have finally let you down.
Well, I don't think finally. I mean, they let me down right out of the gate. It was the pick was on shaky ground from the outset. They've also guaranteed a win in this game, or at least Marcel Darius has, which is always risky. You're going against an Owen, whatever they are now, team who haven't really come particularly close to winning games for a while, and you're guaranteeing that you won't be the team that screws it up and loses to them.
The saddest guarantee of all time.
That's just risky. I mean, that's setting yourself up to look very, very stupid in a couple of days.
Yeah, there's nothing really. It's not like you're going out on a limb when you go, you know what? we're going to beat one of the historically worst teams ever at home.
There's nothing to win from that. I mean, it's a negative thing only. All you can do is screw that up.
That's a good point. I don't know why. I kind of feel like there's a chance Cleveland could win this game. I wish they would just go with Kessler because RG3 hurts whatever chances they did have.
I've thought that there's a chance that Cleveland will win a game for a while now, and I still kind of think they might sneak one over the season somewhere, but I've given up trying to find it. Every time I call them to actually win one, it just doesn't happen. And last week with RG3, he comes back, and you're thinking the one thing in RG3's favor is that he's potentially dangerous. He might do something ridiculous, run around the backfield, avoid pressure, fire a 60-yard touchdown to somebody. But no, he just came back and he was the same useless heap of junk that he was when he went out injured. So I'm done. The Browns are screwed. They're not winning. The Cody Kessler is the best thing that could happen to that team, and they're keeping him on the bench. No, I'm out. I'm tapped out of Cleveland.
Wow, there you go. Hey, Mike. Speaking of heaps of garbage, Terrell Pryor was called garbage and actually said, "Yeah, I was garbage." Was he garbage, or does RG3 just not throw to Pryor?
Pryor's not garbage. I mean, I don't think he's a complete, dominant receiver yet, but he's a contested catch guy. He hasn't really gotten, a ton of separation on, shorter, quicker corners, that kind of stuff. And RG3 is the one who's actually garbage.
Philly at Baltimore. Joe Flacco on a roll, and this is a streaky quarterback. Their defense is playing pretty well. Obviously, a little bit exposed last week versus the New England Patriots, but that's the Patriots. Philadelphia Eagles, their defense looked lights out the first 3 weeks of the season, but they have not been good since, and they've been especially bad on the road. Sam?
Yeah, though interestingly, Carson Wentz had another decent game. Or not another as in it's been a run of them, but another as in from way back in the start of the season when he was good. We saw that guy again. He'd been bad for a while heading into that game, and then suddenly we saw a decent Wentz again. We actually saw him able to complete some passes and do some nice things in the pocket and not just dink and dunk the ball, a few yards and rely on that. If they can get him doing that, this Eagles team is still dangerous. That defense I think is still good, albeit flawed. But the offense, there's no real playmakers there outside of Sproles. And it needs Carson Wentz to actually play well to have a chance of winning. So that's going to be interesting to watch. If you get the Wentz from last week in the beginning of the season, or if you get the guy that was just a hopeless mess for the times in between. And the big thing with Wentz is if you can pressure him, because his passer rating drops from over 90 when he's kept clean to like 30 or something, 31.5, something like that, when you pressure him this season, which is horrendous, obviously. But, it's about this. The most stark thing you can point to is that if you just get heat of any description on Carson Wentz, you basically shut down his passing game.
I really can't remember a more stark swing in terms of enthusiasm from a fan base, or in terms of, hopefulness from a fan base, to the Philadelphia Eagles from earlier in the season to the Philadelphia Eagles right now. If you, after, week 4 or 5, said that they'd be, talk to any Eagles fan, it was like they had hit the lottery. Carson Wentz was easily the franchise quarterback. It was hands down the best rookie and, sometime best one since Andrew Luck. This team was going to the playoffs. That was an afterthought. It was like Super Bowl talk. And now is Carson Wentz even, a legitimate starting quarterback? He's had so many weeks in a row with just below average play, and the rest of the roster, they don't have any wide receivers. It's just the sky is now falling. I think it's somewhere in between. I don't think this team's nearly as bad as their record is right now at 5-8. I think this will be a close game between them and Baltimore, but at the end of the day, Carson Wentz just has not been, and some of that's on his receivers. And I mean, not even some of that, a lot of that's been on his receivers because they are just not good. They are not a good group of receivers. I think I ranked them 29th or 30th in my last receiver rankings. And that might even been generous. I think I bumped them up because of Zach Ertz, but I really just think Baltimore is the more complete team at this point.
By the way, an indicator that I always like to look at for some, teams, rather than record. I mean, if you want to look for sometimes I'll look at the PFF grades, obviously, but another thing you can look at is point differential. And while the Philadelphia Eagles are 5-8, they are plus 18 in the point differential. which would indicate that they should probably be closer to a 6-7 or 7-6 team. They are 1-6 on the road. They have had a tough go of it on the road. If you got bitten, by the way, if you're in their fantasy football semifinals and you got bitten by the injury bug with Melvin Gordon or Matt Forte last week, and you can't get Bilal Powell, Kenneth Dixon's kind of a sneaky pickup if he's available in your league. He's kind of taken over in Baltimore, and he catches a lot of balls out of the backfield. So even if Baltimore, even if they are just passing the ball, Dixon is part of that.
That's no fluke either. He was one of the best receiving backs coming out of LA Tech this year, so they'll keep using him as a receiver.
Let's move on here. We got Tennessee at KC. This is not one of the games of the week, but certainly one of the intriguing games. Marcus Mariota, didn't have a great game on the stat sheet last week, but a New England Patriots scout came out and praised his play nonetheless as they took care of the Denver Broncos. A tough game for them as they travel into Kansas City. Sam, how does this one shape up?
Yeah, I mean, we talked last week that the big thing in their favor in that game was they could run the ball against that Denver Broncos defense, and that's their big weakness. And you could really just pound the ball all day in the way they didn't manage to do to the Colts, and that should be the way to win that game. And that's basically what they did. They ran the ball 42 times against Denver, racked up 170-something yards. Not dominant, but pretty damn crushing. I don't think they're going to be able to do that against Kansas City. The defenses overall are probably not that much different, but Kansas City doesn't have the same weakness up front that Denver does. You're not going to be able to just pound the ball straight up the middle and move those guys off the line of scrimmage. They've got bigger bodies. They've got stouter bodies. They're stronger. They're not going to have the same anchor problems that Denver did. At which point you're putting the ball in Mariota's hands and saying, okay, do stuff without that platform to pass from. At which point I think you get a much worse Marcus Mariota and a much worse Tennessee offense, which, let's face it, didn't exactly put up a huge amount of points against Denver anyway. So I think their offense struggles a lot more than it did this week, and I don't see the defense being able to, dominate Kansas City's offense. I can't see a real way that they don't lose this game.
You've been checking out KC's D-line's bodies a lot there, Sam, I see.
Oh, yeah.
I completely agree with pretty much every sentiment there. I am 100% all in on the Chiefs, as I said last week. I think they are a good team. That Derek Johnson injury, though, really killed me. He does so much for that defense in terms of coverage, just playing zone in the middle of the field, being able to man up on tight ends. He's so good at that, even if, he's lost some juice in the run game in his old age. But that one's gonna impact them down the stretch, just because I don't think they have. While they have some, while Rameek Wilson's played fairly well this year, he's just not even close to being able to replace Derek Johnson's production. So that one hurts. But just in this game, the Titans have a ton of flaws defensively. The secondary is not very good, and they ask them to play man coverage more than anyone else in the NFL. That's not going to work, especially against a guy like Tyreek Hill, who is. I just don't think they have anyone that can keep up with them there. I expect him to have, another big game like he did last Thursday. And so I think the Chiefs do win this one at home.
Macklin also back. He was back last week, but it was his first game in quite a while. I expect him to be more of a bigger part of the offense this week. I like KC as well. If Tennessee ends up winning this game, I think it's going to be because of Marcus Mariota's legs. I think just they somehow figure out a way to get first downs. And, if they end up winning this game, I'll be very surprised if Mariota doesn't have, say, 65 yards rushing to add to the offense. Indianapolis at Minnesota in what is basically a playoff elimination game. The loser of this game is essentially out. Who wins this game and why? Mike?
I went with Indianapolis purely as a toss-up. This is one of the games this week where I can't really make heads or tails of it. I just think, even against a defense like Indianapolis's, that's pretty much weak at all three levels. Minnesota's proven that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter who they're going up against. They're going to throw 5-yard checkdowns every single play, and the offense is going to stagnate. So that's my brief take. I just don't really know. Toss up for me.
It actually will be worth watching the offensive line of the Vikings just to see if they still can't generate any kind of movement or run the ball against this Indianapolis defensive front, like they might as well just give up and go home. Like there's no point in running the ball ever if you can't get any kind of movement against this Colts defensive line. I've lent the other way. I've gone Minnesota, but I agree entirely with Mike in that it's a complete and total toss-up between two incredibly flawed teams that the things that they suck at each, and they're very different things, they're so incredibly bad at them. It's ridiculous. Like the Vikings can't run the ball against anybody. The Colts defense is just horrendous almost across the board. It's an insane game because they match up in a really strange way. But the flaws I think are interesting. The other thing is it's supposed to be like -10 or something ridiculous in Minnesota that week. And the Vikings players are campaigning to have the doors open in that new stadium that, basically one wall is doors. I don't even know if that's mechanically possible, that thing functions when it's -10, but I can't see there's any way they do that. But it would be funny.
I assume, so based on that, do you like Minnesota then?
Yeah, I said I was leaning Minnesota, but I agree that it's a total toss-up.
Fair enough. Pittsburgh travels to Cincinnati. By the way, I like Minnesota as well. Wouldn't shock me if Indianapolis won. Pittsburgh at Cincinnati, I mentioned point differential before, suggesting that sometimes that can be an indicator of how a team is really playing. Pittsburgh has the second largest point differential in the AFC, behind, you guessed it, the New England Patriots, 8-5, and now leading the division. They traveled to Cincinnati. AJ Green, from what I'm hearing, he is practicing, but might still be a week away. Obviously, stay abreast of that situation. Mike, what's the matchup to watch in this one?
I love the way Pittsburgh's offense is trending. They basically just said, Roethlisberger not having too great of a year. The past few weeks, they basically just said, Le'Veon Bell, go win us these games. And Le'Veon Bell's the type of talent that he can just win you some games on his own. Going up against this Cincinnati defense, the matchup to watch is they miss tackles more than anyone else in the NFL. They lead the NFL. I think they have 115 missed tackles. That's the most in the NFL. And Le'Veon Bell will break a tackle or two. The way they run that running game is so different than basically any other team in the NFL. They just run these like hard double teams right at the point of attack, basically latch on to all the defensive linemen and say Le'Veon Bell just make something happen against those linebackers. And he basically does on a play-for-play basis. The Bengals do not have the linebackers that I would trust being able to tackle Le'Veon Bell consistently. So I think Pittsburgh is going to run away with this one.
Yeah, Vontaze Burfict in space against Le'Veon Bell has got disaster written all over it. That's not going to go well. I think Pittsburgh are just a better side overall. This quickfire round is going well.
Yeah, that's what we do, man. Hey, it's rapid fire. There have been some interesting games. New Orleans at Arizona. Floyd out. He was released just 2 days after his DUI. That's right. Don't drink and drive if you want to play for the Arizona Cardinals, guys. Scratch that. Don't drink and drive, period.
Well, at least not if you're a really bad player, or at least enjoying an extremely bad season. It's amazing how easy it is to get yourself booted off an NFL team if you happen to be very bad at the time.
The New Orleans Saints going there. Sam, how does this game play out?
Yeah, I don't like this game. Both teams, I think, have been massive disappointments this season. Carson Palmer is committing the most turnover-worthy plays of any quarterback in the NFL. The only guy above Eli Manning in the league so far. They're throwing the ball or putting the ball in harm's way. Eli Manning was 150%, the league average. I'm not entirely sure what Carson Palmer's was, but it was obviously worse than Manning. So you're talking nearly 2 times the amount of hazardous play by the quarterback in an offense that kind of is more boom or bust. So I want to lean with the Saints purely because they don't have a quarterback actively trying to throw the ball to the opposition.
It's one thing.
I'm going Arizona.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, go ahead, Tuck.
I was just going to say, it's weird how, every year you always say the Saints are like, another disappointing season by the New Orleans Saints. And I'm just wondering if the perception of the New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees and Sean Payton is not what they actually are. And what they actually are is more like a 7-9 team. And we look at their record since 2012, since they obviously, their dominant years of 2009, 2010, and 2011. For some reason, people still think they're that team. Yet their record since then, 7-9, 11-5, 7-9, 7-9, 5-8. You know, as Bill Parcells used to say, you are what your record is, especially if it's 4 out of the last 5 years under 500.
Yeah, this is Jeff Fisher territory.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, for some reason, Sean Payton gets this pass, and this perception that the New Orleans Saints are this amazing team with Drew Brees under center. It's just not true. You know, at what point do you just look at the records and go, no, this is what they are? They're about a 7-9 team. I don't know. Anyway, you were saying, Mike, about Arizona.
About this, and my take is, they've been terrible defensively. Legitimately no talent to speak of on that defense. I mean, even like we said, that Super Bowl year, name a big name from that Super Bowl, name a big impact player that had a great career. There just aren't many. I was going to say,
I don't want to because he's serving 20 years.
There just aren't many that they've had over the past handful of years. Outside of Cameron Jordan, the defense has just been so bereft of talent that, I mean, everyone wants to say that they should be able to win because of Drew Brees, but at the end of the day, if you have a bottom 5 defense, you're going to need a ton to overcome that consistently, and they obviously haven't. And which is interesting because actually over the last month, the defense has come to play. They've been fully healthy, and it's Drew Brees who's actually gone in the tank in that offense. That's why I'm picking against them this week, is because Arizona's defense is actually still pretty good. They're kind of the opposite of New Orleans. Their offense has been atrocious this year, and I think actually losing Mike Floyd might help them. So I'll go Arizona.
Yeah, I like Arizona as well. I think Larry Fitzgerald has a big game. I think David Johnson has another big game, and they continue to roll. Well, not roll, but I think they do win at home. San Fran and Atlanta, unless there is a fantasy game. Sam, is there any reason to watch this game?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's worth watching the Falcons offense. That'll be fun. It will be able to run the ball a lot against this San Francisco defense, but it's like, it's a one-sided thing. It's like watching a boxing match versus, like a world champion fighter against some guy that just dragged in off the street to fill the arena. It's worth watching. It's interesting, but it's only going to go one way.
Kind of funny. Oakland at San Diego. Oakland coming off a bad loss against KC, but they had 10 days to prepare for this one. I haven't heard any reports about Derek Carr's finger. Do we expect him to rebound this week, Mike?
I think his finger got completely overblown this past week. Like I said on the early week podcast, it was the cold. It was not his finger because he played with that finger to do with the finger. So I think that's overblown. I think he's fine going up against San Diego's secondary. The big thing that I want to watch is just how much Melvin Gordon meant to that offense. I don't think he's going to play, and I think it's going to be a lot. I think he meant a lot to that offense because that offensive line is still a nightmare. I think people are going to see that Melvin Gordon is making a lot of those run plays.
True. This feels like the kind of game that San Diego could win, though, just for no particular reason other than they make a habit of doing that. The defense, I think, is more of an interesting matchup. I think they've got some defensive backs that can actually make some plays. Casey Hayward in particular has had a fantastic season. The more that's been asked of him, it's, the Packers once upon a time didn't trust him to even play outside, let alone be a number one corner and go up against top receivers. And it turns out the more responsibility that's been given to him, the better he's become. When he, I think, still leads the league in interceptions. So he can go up against those Oakland receivers. Those guys lead the league in drops collectively. I think that's kind of an interesting matchup. But then the issue is, like Mike says, whether San Diego can get anything going on the ground and try and take some of the pressure off Phillip Rivers to make it all happen by himself. And that's more of an issue.
Rivers has been very turnover prone as of late. And I think that continues. I like the Oakland Raiders on the road. Monday Night Football, the Carolina Panthers really just playing out the season at this point, traveling to Washington and Kirk Cousins. And those Redskins still in the playoff hunt, but they're going to need to continue to win games. How does this game play out, Sam?
Yeah, I like Washington in this game. They just about got over the line against Philadelphia, but I thought they played reasonably well. I think that game was close because Philadelphia showed more of the play they played earlier in the season as opposed to Washington struggling over the line and were playing any worse. The Carolina side, I'm just not sold on. I think the record is kind of what they are. They managed to beat San Diego, but I think Washington are going to end up sneaking this.
Mike?
Going the opposite way. I like Carolina. Kuechly is back. I believe this week. He at least practiced, I think, today. They have the weapons, or they have the defensive weapons to shut down Jordan Reed, who's has that injury himself. And I think if you can shut down Jordan Reed, you can shut down this Washington Redskins offense, make Kirk Cousins throw the ball downfield. I just think that these are fairly evenly matched teams at this point with how poor the Redskins defense has been of late. So I'll go Carolina.
Looks like, by the way, he is practicing. He has not passed the concussion protocol. Luke Kuechly, that is. So we'll see whether he's playing. Yeah, I mean, I think he can do like a light practice or something.
Okay.
But
the game gets canceled.
All bets are off.
Yeah.
That will do it for _Sam. I'm at Tuck on Sports. Do us a favor, head over to iTunes, write us a review. If you want to win a free subscription to Pro Football Focus, write us a review on iTunes and leave your Twitter. We'll be in a drawing to win a free subscription. Check out our other podcasts. We have college podcasts. We have all sorts of stuff going on. Quarterback hot takes. Mike dances for you. It's fantastic. It's good stuff. Week 15, guys. Enjoy it.
Beautiful.